I think we're good to go now. I want to welcome everybody for the participation in this this joint webinar with Onfido and Interpol. Train like a border guard, and that's what we did basically for the past 3 days together with Interpol. We hosted a joint training for US immigration, US border guards over the past 3 days. Unfortunately, it was an online event, quite exhaustive, but pretty learnful. We learned a lot from them, they learned a lot from us, and this is actually the second training we did together with Interpol. The last one was in 2019. That was a physical training in Manila. Last year we wanted to go to the US, but due to all the COVID restrictions, we ended up doing it online. But who knows what will come in 2022. My name is Michael van Gestel. I'm the Global Head of Fraud at Onfido, based in the Netherlands. Today I will host this webinar with 2 other colleagues from Onfido and 1 colleague from Interpol. And for the coming 2 hours, we hope we can teach you some more about document authentication, show you some trends and tricks in document checking. Now, as you can see here, the one at the top, that's me, the Global Head of Fraud. I want to give the word to Dimi. Dimi, you're muted.
Someone has to make a fool of themselves, otherwise it doesn't go well. Hi everyone, my name is Dimitri, and thank you very much, Michael, for the intro. I work at Onfido as one of the senior document specialists together with Simon, and I look forward to having our workshop presentation today. And I'll hand over to Simon.
Thanks, Dimi. Yes, so I'm Simon Horswell. I'm the team lead on the document specialist team, document examiner. I've been in the industry for some 20 odd years, working in government and then in the private sector. So again, enjoying my time at Onfido and looking forward to helping you out and giving you some insight and knowledge today. I'll pass it over to our esteemed colleague Daniela from Interpol.
Thank you, Simon. So hello, everybody. My name is Daniela Jidrovska, and I'm coordinator of Interpol's Counterfeit Currency and Security Documents branch. So thank you very much, my dear colleagues from Onfido, who did invite me for this webinar of today. So we are going to discuss a lot about document fraud trends and further initiatives what we wish to run together.
Thank you, Daniela. So the Onfido solution, now, as you can see here, the customer relationship begins. We are in the middle, and that's where the customer relationship ends. Today we want to focus most on the verification part. That's why we put it in green. That's really about document authentication and the different types of fraud that we come across when we are processing documents. In addition to what we do in an online environment, Daniela, Interpol also has some nice, interesting numbers of what is going on in the physical world, basically in the world of law enforcement. And what do we do on a daily basis? And I say, what do we do? Onfido does a lot of different things, but when I look at Simon and Dimi, what are we doing at a daily basis? Most of our time we spend with, I think it's the global landscape, that's the middle one, reviewing macro fraud trends. Numbers are very important for us, metrics are important. And when I talk about fraud and I talk about the fraud landscape, it's a changing landscape. It's never standing still. When fraudsters are trying to attack us and they manage, then it's good for them. As soon as we catch them, they will change their modus operandi and we need to catch them again. So basically it's a cat and mouse game. Next to that, we're working quite a lot on document onboarding. As you can understand, there are 195 countries in the world, around 195. Each country are issuing several different identity documents, sometimes between 20 or 30. Then we have old versions, new versions in circulation. And every time when a new document comes to market, we need to look at the security features. We need to describe it, and we need to make the translation from a physical document into an algorithm, basically. That's what we're doing. And next to that, we provide trainings. We present quite a lot at exhibitions, and yeah, we hold seminars like this. And with this, I want to give the floor to Daniela to give us a little bit more insights on what Interpol is doing.
Yes, thank you very much, Michael. First of all, I would like to provide you a short background about Interpol, about our mandates, and some information about initiative and activities what are we running from the headquarters in regards to document fraud. Interpol, created in 1923, is today world's largest international police organization, and today we do have 194 member countries. We do facilitate cross-border police cooperation, and we do support all organizations and authorities whose mission is to prevent or combat international crime. And two original mandates that guided the creation of the organization were fugitive apprehension and suppression of currency counterfeiting. However, today we are focusing more on document fraud and analysis of documents. And we do maintain our forensic lab here at Interpol headquarters, and we are also responsible for capacity building and training for all 194 member countries. On the next slide, you will see our structure, our global structure, and here, our Interpol General Secretariat is based in Lyon, France, and is effectively the headquarters of the organization. We have 194 member states, I have mentioned that, and each member country maintains its own national central bureau, what we call Interpol Bureau. And Interpol member countries are connected on real time with Interpol headquarters via I-24/7 Global Police Communication system. So in that way, we make criminal data available to our member countries, and we do provide technical and operational support, as well as capacity building and training. It is worth to mention that we do operate 24 hours a day and 365 days in a year. We have 6 regional bureaus, 4 in Africa, 2 in Latin America, and we do have a representative in United Nations in New York, as well as European Commission in Brussels. However, we do maintain our central IGCI, which is in Singapore. This is Interpol Center for Global Operations. And it serves like second, not second headquarter, however, it is operational since some years ago. Then on the next slide, you will see our global policing capabilities. We do maintain 3 crime programs. So we have counterterrorism, cybercrime, and organized and emerging crime programs running currently, and our activities, responsibilities belong to Counterfeit Currency Security Documents Branch Unit, which is part of organized and emerging crime. However, all these 3 crime programs make a bigger picture, and all of them do belong to Executive Police Directorate services. You will see in the middle of that, we are connected with other units within the organization. So among them, we cooperate with Capacity Building and Training Directorate, who are, colleagues working there are really responsible to help us to design our training, not only in person, but today virtual trainings. As well as we do cooperate with people working within forensic support, as well as criminal analysis, who are helping us to design and develop these crime analytical reports. And the strategy of our directorate is to target and disrupt international networks, identify, analyze, and respond to emerging criminal threats. If we move to the next slide, you will see mainly our activities actually, and our network not only developed with law enforcement but also with the private sector. And at our unit, I mean, we were able to develop, and today we do provide a forum for exchange of ideas and information when it comes to document questions. And our objectives are really to bring not only law enforcement, but also private sector in the fight against document counterfeiting. In that way, we, by working together, we were able to develop a number of tools, specialized tools for law enforcement, and to help, first of all, border control officers to detect fraudulent documents by using our tools and services, as well as we were able over the years to provide them training on first, second level examination of documents. And as I have mentioned earlier, our unit, we are responsible to establish program to provide forensic support, operational assistance, and technical databases in order to assist all 194 member countries in regards to currency counterfeiting, security documents, and border security issues. On the next slide, you will see a number of products which were already available for our users. Some of them are available for public use. Some of them are still restricted and strictly for use of law enforcement. So one of them is our guide, which is titled Introduction to Security Document Examination Training Program and Trainer's Guide. And this guide has been developed jointly with our colleagues from the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime. And based on this guide, we were able to develop our teaching modules as well as our exercises when we deliver this training for border control people in person. And this restricted guide is available only on request, but only to law enforcement people. The similar is our product, e-learning product, security document examination training module available on our e-learning platform, Interpol platform, again for use of law enforcement of all Interpol member countries. And this e-learning module has been developed jointly with our colleagues from United States Diplomatic Security Department of State, and this module is available in 4 languages: English, Spanish, Arabic, and French. Available on DVD as well, and on request at the same time. So this is 1 hour e-learning module. We are focusing more on first and second level examination of travel documents, and there are a number of interactive quizzes and questions in between, videos, and etc. And in the end, our users are able to download the content as a PDF file, as well as download the certificate of completion if they are successful in the end. And we do also run with a number of research scientific projects, and one of them was project on physical chemical study of cross-line intersection. So this is mainly intended for forensic document examiners. So this guide is available on public. So you can simply go and consult Interpol web pages. You refer to crime areas and counterfeit currency security documents branch. Under scientific research project, you can find this guide and you can download. It is available in English only. And it is really relevant for forensic document examiners working in the forensic labs. And for them is very much important to run through different protocols when it comes to determining ink aging. And we were really successful by establish a protocol which is confirmed, I mean verified by already 15 Interpol member states. And we are really proud of that because this is really completely different approach on chemistry of things. It is physical mainly. So please consult this guide and you will find really of relevance, in particular to those who has to deal with chemistry of things. Also, we are responsible to organize conferences, workshops for our users. We used to do it on annual basis. So this year, in 14th of September, we are going to organize a workshop on document fraud for law enforcement, but as well as we are going to invite our colleagues from the private sector, where we wish to come up with certain recommendations on recent measures taken to protect travel documents of counterfeiting. And of course, we work closely with a number of private companies. Among them are Onfido, present today together. And with them, we were able to run already 2 joint training courses on document examination. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. On the next slide, you will see already that we were present almost everywhere around the world, and we started with our program on security document examination in 2015 when we developed this guide together with United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime. And since then, we were able to conduct more than 20 trainer courses around the world. And so far, 8 Interpol member countries participated. It is worth to mention that these training courses are really intended for border control and immigration officers. However, we have additional modules which we deliver on request when it comes to 3rd and 4th level examination of documents, and these are intended for forensic document examiners. On the next slide, you will see our recent cooperation with Onfido and training which has been delivered jointly in Manila, Philippines. And to that training, we had participation of 5 Interpol member countries. And I take this opportunity to thank again to Onfido for their trust to our program. And they were actually one of donors. But not only financially, I would like to thank them also to their expertise because they bring really something which is relevant today when it comes to 2D examination of documents, which is complementary to physical examination. So we are going to talk a little bit later about that. So thank you very much once again for initiative for what we run together, in particular to delivering training together. And now I would just like to mention something on the next slide, please. Something about our tools and services which are available for border control immigration people around the world. Because our idea, or actually our objective, is really to bring Interpol tools and services to the front line and to reach border control people who has to deal with documents on daily basis to quick check whether passport is genuine, or whether passport belong to the original holder, whether passport is fraudulent or is stolen or lost. So that's why our initiative is to provide the technology for national databases to be connected to Interpol databases. So just in one search, cross checks against a national and international database at the same time. So this is our initiative. What are we heading right now to build this internal structure interface and to run really with interoperability to make available all tools and services to the front line. And on the next slide, you will see image of our lab, which is in our headquarters here in Lyon, France. And we are proud that this is only forensic lab which is available here at Interpol headquarters. And we do provide a number of services, of course, mainly forensic support to our forensic document examiners of all Interpol member countries, but also to investigators. A number of services include analyzing counterfeit currency and security documents. And we maintain both genuine and counterfeit sample of both currency and documents in our lab. And we are responsible to allocate international indicative number to newly discovered counterfeits. So we publish this in the form of alerts. And these alerts are available on our platform, I-24/7 Global Police Communication System, to our users. And we run with number of web-based tools, again, restricted use, where all these counterfeit alerts, counterfeit statistics, and warning messages are available for use of our member countries. So in general terms, this is the basics. I mean, what do we do? However, it is worth to mention that we are only 3 people working at the headquarters, and we serve all 194 member states when it comes to document fraud and counterfeit currency issues. So thank you very much. Questions later. So I guess we move forward with the content of today.
So thank you, Daniela, for the intro on Interpol and what Interpol is doing on a daily basis. Always interesting to hear. What are we going to discuss today? The topics of today: the fraud landscape in 2021, physical versus digital evaluation, and that really comes to the training we provided in the past 3 days to the immigration officers of the US. Always interesting how to spot fraudulent identity documents, some underground stories from Onfido, some use cases that we saw in some interesting fraud rings, and the impact of the biometrics combined with document verification. Before we start with these topics, I want to remind you that if you have any questions, there is a question box in the GoToWebinar section. If you have any questions, please post them there, and we will be reviewing the box all the time. So you can do it in between while we are talking or at the end of the webinar itself. Then I will give the floor to Dimi.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Michael. And thank you very much, Daniela, for the explanation about the mission that Interpol has and how you can support other forms of law enforcement, and talking more about the products that you can offer. That's all fantastic news, because we're all working together to stop fraud. And that's why here at Onfido, we take this quite seriously, and we have an approach of sharing the insights that we get from the fraud that we process with our customers. The way that we do that is we publish an annual report, the fraud index, or the identity fraud report from Onfido. And in this report, what we do is we look at the trends and the patterns that we've seen over the last few years by comparing them to each other, and by looking at changes and increases or decreases in the types of activities that we see. So we have a report that which we looked at recently, and we can just give you like the broad overview, which I think is no secret to anyone, that we've had an increase in the number of fraudulent cases that we've seen, and in the proportion of fraudulent cases that we've seen. So if you go to the next slide, essentially this is a snapshot from our identity fraud report of 2020, where we compared for the same period of October, the period between 2018 and 19 versus the one in 2019 and 2020. And we can see that in the more recent year, we've had an increase of nearly 50% in the amount of identity fraud that we've seen. So that's something quite interesting to look at on its own. But it's even also interesting to look at the reason why we have an increase in identity fraud, and why do we see more of it in the online space. So in the fraud world, we frequently use this. Thank you, Simon. We frequently use this model called the opportunity. The fraud triangle that looks at opportunity, pressure, and rationalization. And now, with the state of the world that we're in, with the global pandemic, the opportunity, pressure, and rationalization have changed. One thing that we've seen, for example, is now a lot of bank branches are closing. So that means that the opportunity for fraudsters to launder money by going in branch or by using previously physical methods of trying to coerce someone or using a mule has reduced. So that means because there are fewer branches, and the analysts are foreseeing that even fewer branches of banks will stay open still over time. As we move more into the digital world, that means that we have a greater move of fraudulent attacks into the online world, into attacking the services where you don't have to go and interact with a brick and mortar facility. But we see that the economy is gearing up towards a fully remote type of work. And in that scenario, where the fully remote is the norm, what tends to happen is that businesses and services have to quickly migrate to service their customer base online. And that means providing so all sorts of applications and websites and pages so that their users can log on and continue to transact the way that they were used to previously. But when this is done hastily, what happens is we notice that there are applications that have security flaws or vulnerabilities. So that poses a challenge. How do you scale quickly enough that you can service your users and your customers, but without cutting corners on security and privacy? So yeah, that's what we're seeing. Also, one other thing that we're noticing is that it's not just the banks, but it's also the analysts, and also a lot of other big players are doing a similar kind of approach to the online and remote working, where we've heard from, for example, JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, that they're releasing the rent, or they have been releasing the rent and the leases for all their properties because they weren't foreseeing that a full workforce will ever return into the office environment. But what they're seeing is, much like Onfido is planning a more of a remote or a hybrid approach, where you can take some days in the office, some days work from home. And that seems to suggest an overall change in consumer behavior, where the behavior is very much that I myself as a user, if I'm trying to access some kind of service, if I can't get within 3 clicks and without having to give my phone number, ideally, to the service that I want, I'll just go for a different website, or I'll try to find something else that will satisfy my needs, and that makes solution providers and marketplaces especially have to compete for the attention of the users that they can get. So what I mentioned previously is that we moved a lot more of our interactions online, and now if you go to the next slide, we'll see that this also means that we've increased the surface area for attacks, because some of the previously the traditional in-person applications, for example, like applying for a mortgage, you would previously go and speak with a mortgage broker and get an advisor and things like and talk about rates and things like that. Now there are more and more, for example, mortgage brokers online, and people are like the property market is quite hot. So this creates an increase in surface area for attacks, because a lot of new services have been migrating into this new complex web of different types of applications, different types of devices, different types of attacks. more so, in addition to the change in the surface area, we see a change in the prevalence of the activity, let's say. So if you go to the next slide, what we did is we compared the typical active days or typical active weekdays versus in 2020 versus 2019. And there was quite an interesting outcome here. In 2019, we saw that the majority of the fraudsters were at their peak productivity on a Tuesday, which kind of simulates office work environment, where you would be most productive on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you'd start to be a little less productive as you get closer to the weekend. And obviously Monday, you're never as productive as you are midweek, because you're just recovering from the weekend and just getting your mind into the right focus mode. But what's happened in 2020 is we've seen that this fraud pattern has changed significantly, where now fraudsters seem to be peaking in activity on Thursday, Friday. But however, there is not a huge difference between weekdays and weekend activity when it comes to fraudulent attacks. And this suggests to us that fraudsters are getting more desperate, and there are more opportunities and more targets for them so that they can't ignore them anymore, and they just trying to abuse this as many systems as they can as often as possible, because, as we mentioned earlier, there's a greater surface area to attack. There are perhaps legacy systems that are trying to digitize, sometimes too quickly. And the old ways of potentially doing money laundering by using physical means or physical vehicles of opening, going to bank branches, or using physical money mules, these have now become a lot less available for the people trying to commit organized crime, and especially in the financial world. And on that note, I thought I'd ask our colleague at the Interpol, Daniela, what do you think? What have the trends and the landscape in the fraud been from your point of view, from what you're seeing?
Yes, Dimi, thank you very much. It was very interesting to see that criminal groups are not taking vacation during the weekend. So I definitely can confirm that. But I would like to give a different picture when it comes to document fraud trends. When it comes to, for example, how biopage of the travel document is made, whether on paper-based or polycarbonate. So recently we were able to observe, based again on certain figures provided by our private partners, that counterfeiting of the biopage based on polycarbonate is on rise, so already raised on up to 30%. And then when it comes to counterfeiting biopage on travel booklet based on made on paper, then we have a slightly decrease, only 19%. So on the other hand, booklets, counterfeit documents or booklets who have biopage made of paper is still around 50%, while those who have polycarbonated biopage, it's decreasing, 37%. So that means that attacks today are mainly focusing on the biopage made of polycarbonate, while the rest of the booklet is still attacked on this, I would say, traditional way made documents. Biopage made based on paper. So when it comes to fraudulent passport detected by type of image, either physical, we were able to get some information related to physical attacks related to images which are taken in live environment. So it is approximately 70%. While digital attacks to images sent by user, which could be potentially altered to the ID verification system, it's approximately 20%. However, from our point of view, it's very much difficult to assess whether a document is genuine based on images sent by user instead of generated by trusted device. So maybe you can say something more about that and your views on this phenomenon. Also, at Interpol, we witness countries to report more fantasy documents. So actually fantasy documents which contain fraudulent also biochips. And also that's why we started to maintain this database on fantasy documents. So at Interpol headquarters, we have more than 200 fantasy documents reported. And fraudulently obtained documents as well. So documents based on, these are genuine documents, however, obtained based on fraudulent birth certificate. So this is also on race. This is what we see recently, and I would say almost everywhere around the world. And this type of document fraud is very much difficult to detect because we have genuine document and we have the right identity. So we really have to work hard beyond the borders to obtain relevant information, intelligence, in order to spot this type of document fraud. So this is what I wanted to contribute to this session, and if you can say something more on, from your point of view, what kind of challenges are you facing to detect whether document is genuine or not based on images sent by user. So that's mean digital attacks on images. So maybe we can discuss more later.
Thank you, Daniel. I think we'll be covering that as we move on into the next section. I think the next section is going to address that beautifully. It's almost like you foreshadowed it. Michael, did you want to jump in with any of the questions that have come in?
Yeah, there were some questions coming in, I think for Daniela. One in German. Wie werden am Interpol verweisen? Now, my German is not the best. I speak Dutch, but I think it means who were banned from Interpol.
I didn't catch you, Michael. Could you please speak louder? I didn't understand what did you ask.
Who were banned from Interpol? That was in your introduction part of Interpol. And otherwise, I can ask the person who asked the question to go more in depth on that.
Who were what?
Banned.
Excluded.
Excluded. Banned.
I don't understand. Sorry.
No, then the person who, I don't have the name here, who asked the question, if you can a little bit more in depth about that. I have another question for you, Daniela, here from the participants. Can private companies have open access to Interpol databases like iCheckIt, or is that only for government entities?
No, this is not right question to me because I'm not directly involved in iCheckIt project of Interpol. So for those who are interested to get in touch with people heading this initiative at Interpol, they are free to contact me. So I will provide them the contact details. And we do have cooperation with certain private companies related to this particular project, but I'm not the right person to give answer on that question.
Okay, then we have another one, I think for Simon. Due to COVID-19, most documents when onboarding clients in financial services have gone digital. Did this affect identity fraud?
Of
The
course,
shift
it is.
from
Now we
physical
are
to
running additional initiative in particular to COVID-19 seizures of documents. So it's still ongoing project. So I do not have all figures. However, definitely we already have some numbers reported by different international entities. So we are collecting all this information, and most probably we will have a more clear view by the end of the year when we come up with this analytical report.
Great. Yeah, I think we've seen a similar thing. This is alluding to the section that Dimi's just done. We certainly saw a rise during the COVID period because of so much more of this onboarding taking place in this digital environment. It's exactly what Dimi was talking about. This is the increased surface area, the fact that if industries or any particular businesses were thinking about whether they should put their onboarding process, whether they should make it remote, COVID has effectively forced that. It's become a catalyst that has made the whole industry in general just kind of like go leap years ahead. It's definitely increased fraud because there's an increased frequency. As the volumes go up, the fraud goes up as well. The opportunities there. It's everything that Dimi mentioned in that last section. We've definitely seen a bump. A significant bump, but thankfully we're doing all we can to, certainly in our area, we're doing as much as we can to combat it, and I think that's very much the same across the board. We all anticipated the rise, as it were. Once we realized what was going on, everyone tried to react as quickly as possible. The fraudsters did their bit. Those of us who were trying to thwart them, we did our bit as well.
Thank you, Simon.
I was going to say, any more questions before we move on?
Yeah, I have two more. One I want to discuss outside of this webinar. So that's about proto states from the Ukraine and the documents they're issuing themselves. That can be quite an interesting but long discussion. So the person who asked this question, please provide me with the contact details, and I love to have this discussion outside of the webinar. One more for Dimi. How will Hawala banking be affected by the shrinking of the banking sector?
I'm sorry, can you say again? How
will Hawala banking be affected by the shrinking of the banking sector?
So by Hawala banking, I believe that this is the term for Islamic type banking. I'm not familiar with the term.
I only get the questions. I don't make them up myself.
Well, so maybe we put a pin in this one for now.
We put a pin in this one and we continue.
Maybe.
Yeah,
we'll see if we can come back to this one later.
Over to you, Simon.
Cool, lovely.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to the next section, which is touching on some of these ideas. Basically, physical versus digital evaluation. Daniela, did you want to add anything before I leap into this one? Any more to add on this topic? Physical versus digital evaluation?
I can say something, of course, always, because here at Interpol headquarters, we still run the old-fashioned way of document analysis. So that's why I think
it's better to call it traditional document examination. Old-fashioned makes it sound like it's no longer relevant, and I think all of us in this room would argue it is still very relevant. It's still a very relevant form. I think traditional is probably a better way to frame it. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. So that's why I'm saying we still keep the traditional way of document examination, and I don't think that we'll give up this century of this traditionally travel document examination, because normally travel documents themselves, they are really designed to be verified by humans and by trained personnel who do use sophisticated forensic instrumental techniques for both border settings as well as forensic document examiners. And we used to check substrate properties. We used to check the wall booklet, the wall visa pages, not only to focus on the bio page itself, because if we focus only on a certain part of the documents, we can get a wrong conclusion whether document is authentic and valid and belong to the holder. So that's why I think that both physical and digital examination of documents are complementary one to each other. Of course, today we are witnessed that more and more countries are reporting us scans of documents for first initial indication whether document is potentially fraudulent or not. So that's why these techniques are very much interesting for us, and that's why we join our efforts with you to work together on this. And to, by working together, and we complement each other. So in the end of the day, we get the right conclusion.
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah, I think it's part of this is without the background knowledge that that we've come to the table with in the physical examination and the actual physical documents themselves. Without that kind of knowledge and experience, doing all of the digital evaluation becomes that much more harder. At some point in the chain, you have to have someone who knows a bit more about the physical aspect of it, and I think it's a really good foundation. If I may, I'll move on from this to the next couple of slides. Thank you very much, Daniela. That was wonderful. Let me just go back here. Coming back to the point that Daniela was just talking about, this is a composite image, basically, of it's like a stock capture composite image of thousands of flights going into Heathrow. And I think ICAO survey from, I think, Dimi, was it like 2018, 2019, something like that? Yeah, their survey basically registered that from the top 20 largest airports in the world, you've got maybe a total of 1.5 billion travelers, flyers. So that's just in the largest 20 airports. That's just air travel. That doesn't include land borders. That doesn't include sea borders. We're talking maybe, I think it's been estimated at about 4.3 billion in total across the entire world during that year. Now, obviously, when we got these stats, this was way before any of the pandemic, way before things shut down. So those figures now have dwindled somewhat. I think we can all appreciate that air travel has been one of the hardest hit industries. People are supposed to be traveling less. Certainly, it's dropped quite a bit. So these figures, when we see them next, are going to be way smaller than this. At the same time, again, these figures were drawn up, before the pandemic started. I think you can see here on the graph, we're talking 2017. But what we're talking about here is global penetration of internet usage. And we can only imagine that this is continued on the incline. It may even started with continued with a steeper incline, given the way that everything's gone, how dependent we've all become under all these lockdown conditions to, again, look at the internet. And it's harking back to what Dimi was saying earlier about this whole idea of a greater surface area. There's now much more of a market. We're much more online. So of the 3.5 billion internet users that were estimated back then, when this survey was done in 2017, roughly about 1 billion of those people are banked users. Okay, so it's about 15% of the global population. Those are people that are already on file, or they have their personal file on some kind of database, like with the financial services or the credit bureau, for example. So that leaves us with, quick bit of maths, it's about 2.5 billion that are not banked, as it were. So they're still potential users. Now, whenever they're going to access services, because they're outside of these databases, you're looking at maybe 2 to 3 services per annum, which gives us a rough approximation of about 6.5 billion verifications in this remote setting. And that was in 2017. Now, if we move that forward with all the things that we've just been talking about, I think you can agree we're looking at a much, much bigger figure. But even with this basic maths that we've got here on these figures that are probably a little bit outdated at this point, we've got approximately 4.3 billion flyers that are going through border crossings that are going to have their document examined by a trained border official or through an e-gate, which is set up with software. And again, as Daniela mentioned, using all those different light sources to access all of those many different security features and examine the construction of the document under magnified conditions with those different light sources and camera filters, as opposed to at least 6.5 billion users that need to get their identity verified in an online environment remotely, normally with a still image. I think we're still in the very early process of starting to see video footage being used. But again, it begs the question, who's going to be doing that verification and how is it being done? So we've moved from one condition to another. We've gone from a border guard looking at 4.3 billion to someone in identity verification behind a screen who's looking at in excess of 6.5 billion. So you can already see that there's a greater shift towards this online remote examination. And that was before any of this, any of the last sort of 18 months have hit. So as you can see, it's quite a big shift. This is why we're always trying to push it with physical document examiners, that you have to start putting in security features that are purpose built to be verified in an online environment. So what are the challenges of this? Well, as we mentioned, when we have the document in front of us, we've got lots of indicators. This is an industry that has been, hundreds of years in the making. Lots of different techniques, refinement of techniques, understanding of how these techniques interplay with each other, and how you can properly integrate these security features so that you can come up with really quite robust documents. Even in a physical environment, the ability to just grab the document, maybe catch the scent of it because it's been treated with some kind of chemical or magnify it in some way, it can tell you a lot about that document's authenticity. So we do see very sophisticated forgeries because it's a trained border official or someone with some kind of background knowledge who is going to be looking at these documents in the majority of cases. You have, as I say, these very sophisticated forgeries. You also have stolen blanks. But if you're a border guard, then you can sign up with Interpol and you can gain access to the 24/7 database. You can find out about a list of stolen blank documents. They're reported, they're shared amongst the border community, they're shared amongst law enforcement. You've even got the fraudulently obtained genuine documents, or the FOGs as we call them. These ones are very, very difficult because they're generated by using a fraudulent donor document at the application process. So I can gain a passport potentially if I'm allowed to submit a birth certificate that maybe is less robust security-wise. So I can fake or forge the birth certificate and use that to gain a genuine passport. And at that point, if I only ever see the passport as an examiner, I have no way of knowing. It's going to be very, very difficult. So the level is much higher, but that also means that the percentage, the volume that you're going to see is much lower. I remember when I worked on border control, if we got a forged document during one shift, it was the buzz, it was the big excitement. If you got to clutch them together, Christmas, brilliant. Well, I'm not saying it always happened at Christmas, but you know what I mean. When you compare that to the online environment, what we've got instead is we've got just a document captured at a single image. And I remember that traditionally, 10, 12 years ago, 25 years ago, this would have been unheard of. As I say, even 10 years ago, I think people would have looked at it and just thought, well, it's very limited about what you can say. I think I brought this up in the training this week. I remember an analogy that I would give to someone when I was delivering training, and they'd say, can you examine a document, like can you examine a copy of a document, meaning a photocopy? And my response would be, well, if I take a photo of you today, can I interview it tomorrow? And of course I can't ask the same questions. However, what we've had to do is refine those techniques and really concentrate on the features and the properties that we've got available. The challenges we face are we have a much wider, much higher amount of counterfeits and fakes that come at us because it's amateurs. We don't need someone who's, when you're doing it in an online environment, you're not face to face with your examiner. You haven't got the sweaty palm moment. It's literally sit behind a keyboard, fire and forget. We all know how easy it is to sit behind a keyboard, make comments or do anything like that. And it's exactly the same when you're doing a counterfeit. It's almost a game to some people. So it really does increase the challenge quite a lot. Again, the fact that it's in an online environment, if you're not careful, if you haven't got a robust channel that you're examining these documents through or that you're receiving them through, if that pipeline isn't secure, then you're always open to image manipulation. We all understand that Photoshop, similar software packages, they're available, and the wondrous things that you can do with it. There's many amusing websites where you can see how someone's doctored a photo in some way. You can apply exactly the same principles to an image of a passport or an identity card or a driving license, which makes it much more challenging. There are certain other signals that we now need to be aware of and need to be very keenly looking out for. Also, the lower standard of impersonation. Again, you look at someone at border control, you've got a border guard who's trained for facial recognition, or at least has a good experience with it. They're looking at the document, they look at you, they look at the document, they look at you. They're also picking up on your body language and your cues. If you start to become very, very awkward under that scrutiny, at that point, that's an immediate red flag, which is helping the examiner. You don't get to do that in an online environment. You're given a selfie and you're given a passport or an identity document of some kind. And making that particular use, it means we get a much lower standard. It's a lot easier. Again, I say that anonymity of the internet makes it a lot more attractive. So, the traditional method versus the more frequent modern method. It is very, very challenging. They don't all have Mr. Bean pictured on them, unfortunately, which would make my job a lot easier. So at this point, I think I'd like to hand back over to Michael to take us through how we would spot these fraudulent IDs.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, the challenge, we mentioned it a couple of times before, and we keep mentioning it. if we look in a 3D environment, a physical environment, and we take a passport or an identity card, driver license, in some cases we have over 30 to 40 different security features on that document. In a physical environment, we can use ultraviolet light, we can use infrared light, we have passport readers, magnifiers, name it. As Simon already mentioned, now we have that white light image. It's a static white light image. Now, in some cases, it's something like a liveness video of the document, but we don't feel it, we can't smell it, we can't play with it, we can't tilt it. So that brings us back in the, I always call it the translation from a physical document to an online document. That means we bring 40 security features back to 5 to 10 indicators. I don't even call them security features, but indicators per document. And with those 5 to 10 indicators, we must authenticate the document. So the document, the areas of focus, we have main areas, or there are main areas in the document. It's just how you want to check it. It's also always in the trainings that we provide. Some people start at the upper right and go to the bottom left. Other people do it the other way around. I always say when you check a document, always do it in a consistent way, do it in the same way so that you can't forget anything. Important to segment the document into small areas of isolation and look for details and focus on the specific data points. It's about 2 years ago when Simon and myself were in India for document training as well. And then we said, yeah, when you want to attack a document, which areas of the documents are you focusing on? What do you want to attack when you attack a document? Now we came up with the big 5. Number 1 is the photo. We have the name of the holder, we have the date of birth, we have the date of expiry, and we have the document number. If you check an identity document and you focus on those 5 areas, so segmenting the document as well, yeah, you will catch a lot of fraud. Because yeah, the photo, it will be somebody else. The name, I don't want to get a hit in a database. Date of birth, I want to enter a bar. Date of expiry, my document is expired, or the document number as well. I don't want to get a hit in a database. If we go to the next slide, we can get a nice image of segmentation of a document. I talked about the big 5 with photo, name, date of birth, expiry date, document number, but we can also do it in a different way. With a different way, I mean, we can look at the applicant picture. We have the header of the document with the nationality or where the document is issued. We have a personalization section. We have an MRC section. We can use the front of the document. We can use the back of the document. But it's all small areas. And yeah, as already mentioned, Onfido is looking at these documents in an automated way as well as manual. Yeah, to train your machine learning, it's easier to look at smaller sections than to look at a document as a whole. But that's the same for the human eye. When I see the whole document, or when I see a person standing in front of me and I focus on the face of a person, for example, and I look at the whole face, I can get distracted by the hair, by the makeup, by a beard, no beard. And then again, when I look at small details, like only at the eyes, only at the nose, only at the mouth, then you will see more details and it will make your life a lot easier. And that's the same with identity documents. We go to the next slide. We mentioned it before as well. If we check a document, looking at specific areas, we have the image of the holder. Again, the headers, we have the personalization. But what I wanted to say is, and it's on the next slide, use reference material. And we talked about there are over 4,000, 5,000 different identity documents in circulation. I'm in the industry over 20 years now. I'm a document expert. I can mention myself as a document expert, but even for me, it's impossible to be familiar with all the security features on identity documents in circulation. And that's why when I'm checking a document, I always use reference material. And in an automated way, that means a template, which we configure. On the other way, when we do it manually, there are several free databases available online where you can find reference material like this. In this case, the document in the bottom is an original passport card from the United States of America, and the document at the top is a completely counterfeit document of the same card. When you have the document at the top in isolation and you've never seen it before, it can be quite difficult, can be quite hard. But then again, it's that game of spot the difference. I always play it with my kids as well, and I even train my kids in detecting fraudulent documents. But I just show them 2 images, and the only thing I tell them is the image on the left is the original one, and now you're going to find the differences. And that's basically the game that we're playing on a daily basis. If you go to the next slide, always an interesting one. Does this face belong to this document? Again, many documents in circulation. On some documents, we have grayscale photos of the holder. On other documents, it's color. It's a combination. In the French passport, the photo on the left should be in color. The photo on the right-hand side should be in black and white. Again, the document at the top is the fake document. Document in the bottom is the original document. What we can see at the document at the top, when we look at the secondary image of the holder, is that it's in color. Again, we need a sample document to know this. On one document, it's color. On the other document, it can be color and black and white. But with 2 photos, it's always very important to compare those 2 images with each other. On some documents in the United States, even on some driver license, you have 3 or 4 different photos, or different photos. It's the same photo, but of the same holder in different areas in the document, which means if I'm going to attack a document and I change one photo, I need to change all the other photos as well. So this is a very basic check that you can do if you check an identity document. Then on a lot of documents, we see an MRZ, a machine readable zone, and this is purely designed so that the document can be read by a passport reader. There is some it's not even hidden information. There is some check digit in this document. What we see at the top line, this is a passport of Vietnam. Here can we simply see the P stands for passport. Then we have a chevron. Then we have the issuing authorities, in this case Vietnam. We have the surname separated by 2 chevrons, and then we have the given names. The second line is a passport number. Then the number 7 over here is a check digit. We can calculate this by hand, but yeah, while doing that, it will take you a couple of minutes to do the calculation. So better use a machine for that. Then we have the nationality of the document. So you can also compare the issuing authority with the nationality. If that's different, that means it's a residence permit or an alien passport. Then there is a date of birth with a check digit. We have the gender, we have the expiry date, and we have some optional data and an overall check digit. Now, personalization font. This is a passport of the Ukraine. In this case, there are only 2 types of font used. It's for the personalization and the permanent details. The variable details are the name, the surname. The permanent details is just the box of surname and the box of given names. So we can detect different types of font on one document. And when we take a couple of days, we can teach you everything about security features. But what I said, in the translation of physical to digital, a lot of these features get lost. So we are very depending, and we build great algorithms to look specifically at the font of these specific documents. Yeah, the pre-printed label fonts, as you can see here, it's again a different font than the personalization itself. This is a blank booklet. You can use this template as well very easily in Photoshop, where you can upload your photo, put in some details, put an MRZ there, print it and make a photo, and you can try to open a bank account. And if you won't manage with Bank X, you can just go to the other bank. As Simon mentioned, it's nice and anonymous.
Yeah, I'll just move the slide on quickly from that. Thanks for pointing out, Michael.
Yeah. It's always good, but people are not stupid, Simon. You can find everything on Google. It's just a handbook of creation of interesting information. Sometimes specific data points, such as a document number or personal number, will be in a different font. In this case, there is a specific font used for the US passport, or for the personalization of the US passport. When I compare the numbers of the date of birth or the expiry date with the document number itself, we can see when we look into more detail that that the font is different which is used. And this is so challenging for us, and for a human it's challenging, but sometimes you have some more time to detect it, you have your magnifier, but in an online situation, a computer is way faster in stating if a font is the same or different than a human is. So sometimes we get a question, is the computer better than the human eye? In some cases, yes, in some cases, no, but in many cases, the computer is way faster than the human is. And that's why we use computers in the machine learning. To come back on the font for the MRZ, for the machine readable zone, that's always the same font which is used. So if you remember this type of font and you come across an identity document with an MRZ and you see the optical character recognition font, OCR type B, then you can make your comparison. Some good indicators here, it's the 1 without an horizontal bar at the end. We have a 3 with a flat head. We have an open 4. The 6 and the 9, we can turn it around. When you look at the number 8, the bottom circle is smaller than, or the bottom circle is bigger than the upper circle. The I is the only letter which is serifed. And if you compare the M and the W, you can't turn them upside down. These are just some of the indicators of an MRC. For me, always, the thing I look at first is the number 4, which is an open 4. Does this data belong to this document? Let's check. Now we have over 350 people, so I won't ask the question to investigate the document, but this is a passport of Australia. What I just told you, we have the first line, which is passport, issuing authority. Then we have the surname, which is citizen. We have the name Jane, which is the given name. Then in the second line, we have a passport number, a nationality, we have a date of birth, an expiry date, and some optional data. Yes, Simon, if you can put the pointer on. That's good. So when we look at this document, it's a specimen document, and we can make the adjustments ourselves as well, of course. But just by simply comparing the data mentioned in the MRZ with the data in the visual zone, so the MRZ at the bottom, the visual zone at the top, we can see when we focus on the date of birth, we can see 1984, the month 06, day 07, that's correct. When we look at the expiry date, we can see 2019, March 26. And in the visual zone, we can see March 1st, 2024. So I don't need a machine, I don't need advanced examination equipment. It's just by using your common sense and know what kind of data is there on your document. Then I have 2 more slides before we go to the grand stories of Onfido. Providing an holistic overview and what we say, use your common sense. Sorry. What you see here after nationality in the MRZ, and we hide some, or we've hidden some of the information due to the PII data, but I can see the first number of after the nationality is a number 3, and this should be a year of birth. This is just comparison between again date of birth and date of expiry, where we can see it's 05, it's June, it's not correct. Here we have day 64 of month 35 in the year 3 something. So it's a non-existing month, non-existing day. It's also when we go to the next slide, and again, it's using your common sense and compare the data. The next one is a Russian passport. Compare the letters R in this document. It's maybe a little bit small for you to detect and to see, but different R's are used in the same section. Now that never ever happens. What I said is OCR type B, always in an MRC. And what I said, look at that 4. It's a closed 4 in the MRC. So different types of font in the same section, never. Different types of font in the document number compared to the personalization section, yes. but not in the same section. Then I will hand over to you, Simon.
Thank you very much, Michael. Cheers. Okay, so what we thought we'd do now is just give you some of our case studies, a couple of things that we've encountered, just stuff from the annals of Onfido, as it were. So the first thing that I thought we talk about here is user deduplication. This is originally a computer term that just talks about removing excessive or duplicate data, as the name suggests. When we're talking about identity and identity verification or registration, what we're actually talking about instead is making sure that we've only got a single unique entry. So same idea, but just applying it so that you don't end up with duplications of the same identity popping up everywhere. You've got like a single source of truth. You can only register once, let's put it that way. Now, what's recently happened, I think we should all be very aware of the fact that cryptocurrency took off. There was a massive surge. Quite recently, there was a huge surge as well. And as a result of this, we started to see new rules being introduced. So that asset holders now have to actually go through KYC. Before, it was relatively anonymous, which might have been one of the attractive parts of it, but now we're having to go through a KYC process. These regulations have been brought in internationally. Now, this has coincided at the same time with the Financial Action Task Force, or the FATF, introducing these guidelines in, I think it was March of 2020, where they've actually kind of outlined how these kind of things. And one of the things that they've specified is addressing deduplication, either by searches of database or by manual search, or indeed by running algorithms or similar kind of things that we do on Onfido. So it's quite timely that all of this has come up at this point. What we've started to do as a result recently as well is we are trying to introduce features to broaden the fraud suite. So it's not just simply document and facial verification that goes into identity verification anymore. This idea of deduplication, we can carry that further. So we can look at things like device data. So this now becomes a lot more interesting. We've got kind of like behavioral stuff in there as well. So it's, are you signing in from exactly the same device? Do we have numerous entries with numerous identities, all signing in from exactly the same device from the same IP address? One or two members of a sort of like connected household, fair enough. But if we're talking hundreds of entries, then we're looking at a fraud ring that are based in one particular location. They're using one particular piece of equipment. Other things we can look at, network data, as I mentioned, you've got IP, geolocation as well. We can use things like this to sort of ascertain. It's like, well, okay, if I'm logging in with this identity from one location, how can I be logging in minutes later from a completely different location in another part of the globe? Can the same document be used in two different locations at the same time? We tend to think not. Document data, as we talked about already, the number of the document, the name, the date of birth, any of the PII that's on there is vital, but that speaks to the heart of this whole deduplication effort. So making sure that these entries are only occurring once, and that you do have unique identity, that document is unique to one identity and doesn't pop up somewhere else with a different person bearing it, same document number, completely different bona fides. On top of that, we can talk about the biometric, physical or behavioral or biomechanical challenges that we put forward as well. So all of this now gives us a much more complete and robust approach when we talk about identity verification, as opposed to just the more traditional face and document. So as we explained several times so far, this message should be coming home loud and clear. Fraudsters adapt. They don't hang around. They don't wait for you. They're not waiting to get a big knock on the door. They're moving on. If something doesn't work, then they just try somewhere else. It's basically, as we said, that the surface attack area has increased. And as a result of that, basically, it being relatively anonymous, we're talking about this being essentially a high volume trial and error. Okay, it's really simple. There are fraud networks where people share this information online. So it's simply a case of, I will keep trying until it works, and as soon as it works, I will exploit. And when I exploit, I'll let other people know because I found a chink in the armor. And this is basically, It's the fraudsters trying to find the weakest animal in the herd. And essentially, this is why you have to have more and more robust approaches to your identity verification, to your onboarding process, to your registration process, and then also your authentication process, because you really want to make sure that you're stopping any of these bad actors as early as possible, and you certainly want to make sure that they're not taking advantage of anything that's already been embedded before your drawbridge was closed. Let's put it that way, before your fortifications were more secure. So it's very much a case of they will exploit the weakest, and the duplication detection is a key part of that now as well. I think we have to admit that. I think at this point, I'd like to hand over to Dimi to talk about the next section.
Thank you so much, Simon. And this actually ties in with what you are talking about, specifically duplication or repeat use of the same type of information. And as you mentioned, fraudsters will exploit every single vulnerability in every single system at scale. And the reason they do that is because fraudsters have a very, let's say, productive mindset. They're very mindful of the return on their investment. So if they can find an easy way to exploit one vulnerability, they'll do it until the vulnerability is closed. That same vulnerability, and then between their attacks they will only make minimal variations so that they can essentially fly under the radar. And that's why we look at this next section, which is looking at fraud data and repeats. And this is something of a pattern that we've discovered by looking at the data that our customers have been essentially exposed to. So yeah, what is the problem? If we go to the next slide, essentially the problem is we've seen this typology of fraud where one fraudster will create tens or hundreds of identities, attack one single customer en masse, and then as soon as he can make some profit, he will stop attacking that customer and move to a different provider or a different customer, and essentially run exactly the same attack or the same fraud attempt again. When we were looking at data, we saw that up to 60% within this one financial customer of all of the fraud attacks were related amongst themselves, either by using the same templates or by using similar sets of information or by reusing personal data. In this case, it was the photographs of the holders. So, well, if this is the problem, how do we think about the solution? And if we go to the next slide, essentially, Onfido today, it only analyzes one document at a time. And what that means is, if we received a picture of a passport, we will run an assessment and we'll say what the assessment is at that point in time. However, we can leverage more information, and sometimes we can look at the context of that document. So in this example, we can look at, for example, these two documents that were processed within the same customer's account, minutes apart. However, they have different names, but the same face. So we have a product that can help find that, but we can help deduplicate this entry if, for example, the names were not extracted correctly, or if they were maliciously and purposely wrong. We can use the known faces product to identify, hey, these two documents share a face, so this is very likely to be fraud, and the data, especially if the data isn't the same. But then if we were to look at more attributes other than just the face on a document, if we click, we can notice that actually within the same customer, for the same attributes, i.e. document number, we've had 3 different sets of names and 2 different sets of faces, because as we mentioned earlier, fraudsters reuse what they already have. So it's not in any way a stretch of the imagination that if they have one photo of a person, they won't reuse it across all of their fraud attempts. Or if they have one document number with an MRZ that works, they won't reuse it in subsequent attempts, because from their point of view, they're just cutting corners and getting more for their investment, or more bang for their buck. So this is something of a pilot that we're looking at. And within a customer, we're looking at doing partial data deduplication by observing repeated elements such as, hey, we have the same document number repeated, but the names have changed. Obviously, that can happen for people that get married or go through name change procedures, but it's unlikely that the document number will be the same and the document name, the names will be different. So that's a very strong indicator for fraud. Now, in the next section, if we could look at even more information, for example, the customer and the profile of the customer, we can leverage this information further. What we would do then is something like, if a customer A was impacted by this fraud and we discovered it, then we can protect customer B, which would be impacted by the same fraud, for further down the line, without them having to first be a victim of this fraud. Now, what this means is it raises a really high barrier for entry for fraudsters, because as soon as they attack one system, they're known to all of the systems that use the same solution, in this case Onfido. So this is generating something that we call network effects. And we think that this would be extremely powerful if we can get a few of our customers on this, because as we've noticed is that fraudsters tend to attack multiple sets of services as much as they can. And if we go to the next slide, we can see that we could layer even more information onto this, so that we can see any kind of like inherent connections by looking at devices and other sets of metadata, such as, like I say, device make and device model, network information, and other kinds of browser headers and so on, and geolocation and so on, so that we can build that robust image of fraud patterns and fraud rings, especially since we know that we have over half of the fraud, as I mentioned earlier, is usually organized fraud, with about 30% of the fraud being opportunistic fraud, where it's not someone trying to attack at scale, but just found a loophole and executes it against it once. And on that note of attacking a system at scale and using the same vulnerability over and over, in case you don't believe me, I'll hand over to my lovely colleague Michael, who can tell us a bit more about other fraud rings.
Thanks, Demi. Yeah, some other interesting fraud rings that we came across over the past year. Internally, sometimes we say 2020 was not the year of the monkey, the dragon, the snake, or the tiger. 2020 was really the year of the fraudster, and it has to do with COVID. We saw numbers spiking, and again we saw some interesting cases. This is one about the Indonesia identity card. And when we go to the next slide, Simon, this is the Indonesian identity card. It's just a plastic card with a dye sublimation printed photo and text on it. It's not the strongest secure document. And that's most probably one of the reasons why fraudsters pick this document and try to attack us. It proved very popular. We saw hundreds and hundreds of documents. It was a large-scale attack, and within a couple of months, we saw 3 separate and distinct fraud rings. Within 1 month, and that's what I said in the beginning. When a fraudster is attacking you and they manage, they will stay with the same modus operandi. As soon as we catch them, they will change their modus operandi, and it can be a slight difference in a document number, a color of a print, or some of the other indicators which they put on or which they take off this card. As said, there are not that many security features on this document. If you can go one back, Simon. We have the photo, which is a good indicator for us, especially when you zoom in with some of the details. The specific font which is used, especially in the section of the NIC number. Then we have at the top, Provincie di Jakarta. It's also a good indicator. And we have the Goldara, which means blood type. It's on the left side of the photo. And these are some of the indicators which we noticed. And after we knew, we were looking at all the different documents that were coming in, and we saw they made the same errors over and over again. If you go to the next slide, the 3 fraud rings that we found, fraud ring 1 was a complete physical counterfeit, so the document from front to back was completely fake. Fraud ring number 2 was a physical counterfeit based on the same template with the same signature. And we have some images from that. We had same issuing dates, we had same signatures. So as soon as you know that, you can use those identifiers, especially when you do it automatically, to pick out these type of frauds. Fraud ring number 3 was a digital counterfeit, so they didn't print the documents anymore, they didn't cut the documents, but they just send in digital files. But again, based on the same template. I have some images of the different fraud rings. Number 1 is fraud ring number 1. This was a physical counterfeit. As you can see at the left, I don't know if you have your pointer, Simon. Yeah, this is a very poor document. Look at the outside lines. It's poorly cut, it's folded, it's not even plastic, but it looks like it's paper. Then we go to compare the different fonts, which are different. And yeah, that was basically it in this case. But yeah, the cut corners and the paper structure of the document really gave it away. Also the font. This was the complete counterfeit. Then we have number 2. Fraud ring number 2, and now you can see the font in the area of the NIC card. Again, we have the cut corners, especially at the bottom right. When you see it there, it's not round, but you can really see it's almost a square corner. And then again, the blood type area, if there's no blood group, blood type mentioned, there should be a small line, so small stripe. In this case, it's empty. And the signature, and have a close look at this signature, because you will see this one again. Fraud ring number 3. This was the digital one, where you can see the coloring of this document is way more clear than the original one. When you look at the original one, the photo looks a little bit blurry, but that's how it's printed. That's the technique. Here it's way more clear. The complete area of blood type has disappeared on this document, so they created a template, but they forgot to put it in. And again, it's on font. But this is how challenging it is. We only have 4 indicators on this document, almost no security features. But once you know the modus operandi of the fraudster, you're able to catch different types of fraud. And just for fun, I made some copies of different documents that we came across. What you can see here is January 7, 2017 was a very popular date for Indonesian identity cards to be issued, especially for people with the same signature. And these are just 9 or 10 different samples that we show here, but we have hundreds and hundreds with the same data. Which means you can even see the pen in the 0701 area, which is the same, so they just use the same template. Which means if I do a search on Indonesian identity cards issued on January 7, 2017, it doesn't tell you it's a fraudulent document, but it tells us to have a closer look at this document. And that's how you catch fraud. That's basically what we do. Then I will give it back to Demi.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Michael. I think it's quite interesting to see exactly in practice when the cases that we describe, or the typologies or the fraud types of attacks that we describe end up being followed almost to the letter. It's like, okay, you took the same image and you cut this part out and then you pasted it on a bunch of other images repeatedly. Then let's see what we can do about that. And on this topic, we think about, okay, one of the things that users tend to have or to present for most of the remote identity proofing are faces. So how can we leverage the use of the face, or what facial biometric technology can we look at to make the most out of any onboarding interaction, or any other kind of interaction, potentially for even returning users? So what I wanted to do is I wanted to think about what are the use cases that facial biometric can enable, and go through a quick description of how that might be achieved and how you can get it done. So the first use case would be something like proof of document ownership. So it's not sufficient just to have a picture of a passport. For example, if I have a picture of Simon's passport, that doesn't mean that I am Simon, even if the passport itself is genuine. I know that there's quite a bit of discrepancy between there. I mean, maybe Simon can pass for Michael or vice versa, but I don't think I can pass as either one of them. But yeah, that's one way to use biometric technology to prove ownership, that make sure that the person presenting the document and the person in the selfie in the document is the same. You can use facial technology or facial biometric technology to assess for liveness or proof of live. And by this is what we mean is presentation attack detection, i.e. making sure that the person presenting themselves is the genuine article, not a picture of a screen or a person with a mask or something like that. Another use case that we've seen that leverage the biometric technology has been the proof of intent, where you can start the basis of a verbal contract by listening to someone say a message or complete a phrase. As we saw earlier in the presentation, we can do some deduplication based on facial features. This is a product that Onfido already offers, and that's the known faces product. And finally, we can do authentication or log in, let's say, for returning users. Once you've created a strong record based on your passport and your facial biometrics, why should you need to create a password for a website when you can just log in with your face? Why shouldn't that be, if it's hard enough to reproduce and it's hard enough to it provides enough of a risk mitigation, why shouldn't something that's a lot more easier to access, such as smiling at your screen, be the way that you provide a strong security focus for personal and private life? So now I wanted to look at how would we do a proof of ownership for using the facial biometric technology. Well, it's quite simple. What we would do is we would need two faces, ideally, and we would have to compare them amongst between themselves. If the comparison returns a high proportion similarity, we're likely looking at the same person. If we're looking at a low proportion similarity, likely not the same one. And the way a computer does that is by seeing sets of pairs of images that either match or don't match, and then over time it learns the association. But on Onfido, we're quite proud of how we developed this, because the majority of the training sets that you can find are generally pictures of selfie to selfie. But in the case of Onfido, the problem that we're trying to solve is compare the picture on a document with a selfie. So that's why we built our algorithms based on this specific set of pairs, which means that in general we're more accurate on matching a selfie to a document than our competitors or other businesses that have used selfie to selfie data sets to perform their training. The next, as I mentioned, the next use case that we can enable is proof of life. And there we go, my videos can start as well. And by proof of life, we mean how can we prove that this person is real, exists, living and breathing. So here we have 3 examples of 3 different sets of technology that we can use. So starting from the first one on the left, that's the pulse detection, where essentially there are minute variations in the color of the surface of your skin, depending on when your blood pumps. When your blood pumps through it based on your heart pumping. And the same thing happens with the chest of a baby that you can see on the right, that it moves up and down. So if you can test for those small small changes in the coloration of the skin or the depth of the breath, then you can assess that a person is alive. The middle object shows non-rigid motion, which is a technology where you can look at essentially groups of pixels moving together, because it's unlikely that just your eyes will blink. You don't blink just with your eyes the same way people know how to distinguish a fake smile from a real smile, is that the whole face smiles for a real smile, and it's just the mouth and lips that smile for a fake smile. So it's unlikely that you have a real person presenting themselves that doesn't have small variations with the entire surface of their face. So that's another technology. And the final one example that we're seeing here to prove that someone is alive that we could use is structure from motion. So by taking it like a form of panoramic picture of yourself, like a reverse panoramic picture of yourself, I guess, you can create a 3D image from that, which would be obviously different when you would try to do the same thing from a still image or an image of a mannequin. So these are some technologies that we can use to determine, like I said, the proof of life aspect of the biometric technology. The next one that we can look at is proof of intent. And here is what we can do is we have a technology that does text lip tracking. So we can track the outline of someone's lips, and we can determine that someone is actually speaking like the words that we expect them to say. Naturally, this has to be tested across multiple languages, and that is something that might take a little bit longer, but we do support quite a few languages already in the text-to-speech and image-to-speech section of detecting that someone is saying the right things. And we can also test that this is the right person presenting it, rather than a deep fake or another kind of spoof using a computer screen, by using texture analysis, so that we can tell that the right person is saying the right things and they're not being a spoof in the sense of showing a presentation attack. The next use case which we can support is deduplication. So as I mentioned earlier, we can have sometimes returning users to a platform. For example, if I forgot that I already have an account with, let's say, bank X or service Y, and I go in and try to create a new account, when I have the same face, but potentially use a different document, because I use my one ID for the old one and a new ID for the newer one, because a lot of time has passed since. It's one of the requirements that the service does deduplication. So matches me against every other record of myself. And we can do that by using the known faces product at Onfido. So we can compare all of the all of the selfies that are used at onboarding with all of the previous selfies, so that we can find a match for any two selfies that are assigned to the same character. This could be either non-malicious, like I said, I forgot my account, I forgot I had an account, so I created a new one, or it can be completely malicious, where I have an account already, and then I create another account with a new set of information, but I reuse my face. So deduplication, good for data quality and fraud prevention. In any case, that's this use case, and the reason why we think that it's really important that we develop this facial recognition technology is because we think it's inherently quite hard. And I wanted to showcase how hard that might get by looking at this next slide, and hope to get to ask all of you or participants on the call, how many different faces do you see in this presentation or on this deck? I'm going to give you a couple more seconds so you can think to yourself, how many different faces do you see? And if the answer is 1, congratulations, you have correctly identified all the faces of Harrison Ford, or just at least some of the faces of Harrison Ford. And maybe you felt like this was an easy task, because of course you can recognize if the same person has changed over time, or maybe they got their hair got gray, or they have a beard or a bit of a stubble. Or if that seems easy to you, let's look at the next slide. And in this next slide, I'm going to ask you, how many different faces are you seeing now? So this is supposed to showcase the difference between familiar and unfamiliar face recognition. If you see for the first time, someone whose features you're not used to, it's a lot more difficult to see the differences. Okay, so now, here we go. Thank you so much, Simon. Actually, we're seeing two sets of faces, and the two sets of faces that we have are either the ones with a red outline or without. So we were seeing two sets of faces with variation over time, or hair placement and makeup, etc. with that. So hopefully this highlights that it's sometimes not as easy as you think to do face matching, and even within the same face, if you're looking at known faces, you have within person variability. So from the images of the actors that we have on screen actually match diagonally. So we have Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, and I'm afraid I don't remember the name of this other lady, or two other ladies. But
you put two Dutch ladies in the presentation.
Yeah. So maybe Michael, you can remind me their names in case you know.
Yes. Chantal Jansen and Bridget Maasland.
There we go. Thank you. I knew someone would save me here because my pronunciation wouldn't be so good. But yeah, essentially what we're trying to say is that it's difficult to recognize faces. Like facial recognition is quite hard, and we have the empiric data to prove it. So on my next slide, we looked at the scientific literature and how what the error rates are for people doing facial matching across different sets levels of training or different levels of exposure to this kind of work. And what we've seen is that cashiers are like flipping a coin. They generally hit and miss when it comes to matching people's faces. Police officers are pretty good. They only have an error rate of about 20% when it comes to facial recognition, innate facial recognition. And passport officers, according to the study that we've seen in 2014, they have an error rate of roughly 14%. So even if they have training and they have experience and they've been supported by other technologies, passport officers can still make errors quite frequently relative to what the regulators expect us to do, and when we're approving someone and the level of assurance that we need to have or to prove to do business with certain people. So on that note, what I wanted to do is look at how this doesn't correlate generally with employment duration, and you only get small gains in facial recognition with training and feedback. But what we can do, or what we can use here, is look at the people that are the best at it. And as with most things, this ability has a distribution, where on the far left side you have people that are face blind. So those are people that generally have a problem recalling facial features and matching them to the people that they've seen them with. Then you have most people, which are within 2 standard deviations or 4 standard deviations, 4 standard deviation spread. And then you have the super recognizer, the extreme opposite of face blindness. And these are people which are fantastic at recognizing faces and recalling where they've seen them in what context. And if you are a super recognizer, there are a lot of researchers that would like to work with you and speak with you, and you maybe have a job with law enforcement, because those people are really, really good at what they do, and they can look at CCTV recordings or video surveillance recordings and like recognize people from months past in other CCTV recordings that they've seen and put cases together like that. It's quite remarkable to see. But yeah, this is why Onfido uses super recognizers to train our algorithms, so that as we develop computer facial matching technology, we use the best of what human ability is to train an algorithm, so that it can only get better from there. Finally, I'm going to skip through next slide. Yeah, this is an example of the known faces report that I mentioned, where you can match the person to previous attempts and help support your internal compliance teams by being able to, as I mentioned, both remove duplicates in the case that the person's trying to come back and that they've previously had an account they've forgotten about, as well as protect against fraudsters reusing facial features. And one more slide on from my side is the final point or the final completion of the use of the facial biometric technology would be to reuse it every time you come back. So you would create an account, you would register for it, you would verify that the person's identity is correct and that they have the correct permissions. You would authenticate, so you would provide the ability for ongoing and repeat validation to return to the same system. And you would provide authorization, so determining the right of access for specific parts, so such as authorizing high-risk transactions. You can manage permissions with authentication. So, for example, if someone changes the visibility of certain features, and you can self-service. So that you don't have to have an analyst support a password change, which according to a Gartner study costs about $50 every time someone has to call your customer support team. That costs roughly $50 for your business overall to service the password change. So if you can do that by using facial biometric technology in a fraction of the cost and the time, why not? And finally, deprovisioning or removing credentials, revoking permissions, and so on. All of this can be done with the use of facial biometric technology and other technologies, but this one is one we feel is easy enough to use and secure enough that it strikes the perfect balance between usability and fraud deterrence. And on that note, I would like to open the floor to the questions that we've been getting in the meantime. And thank you all very much for listening and for putting questions up.
Thank you, Dimi. Yeah, we have about 10 minutes left, so I want to go back to the questions. There are some interesting questions coming in. This one already came in at the earlier stage, but I think it's a nice one in addition to what you just said. Is video KYC an effective tool to combat new digital frauds? Dimi.
Sorry, can you repeat that again? I'm not sure I followed.
Is video KYC an effective tool to combat new digital fraud?
Well, I think when we define video KYC, we need to explain what we mean because video KYC can mean many things to many people. For some people, video KYC is the equivalent of the, for example, the German method or the German BaFin requirements, where you have to go on a video call at a given time slot with an analyst or a branch, like the equivalent of an onboarding specialist. That could work in the future. I would say the challenge is the number of people that need to be able to assess a document from a webcam, and the number of users that would have to go through this flow do not match up. I think a border guard would struggle to assess a document through a webcam for authenticity. So there aren't enough retired border guards on the planet to be able to support all of the onboarding of everyone that needs to go for an onboard through video, through a video method, an active video method. There's the other hand, the passive video method, where you can submit recording, like make a recording of yourself and a recording of your document, and that can then be reviewed from a video, but in a non-live environment. At a later stage, and I think that is actually the goal, the most likely the convergence, where we're seeing both Onfido invest as well as other, for example, manufacturers in the document industry. They're investing in this kind of like hybrid model of having some features that are designed for assessing in a 3D way, and some features designed for being assessing on a computer, and a recording of those two interacting between themselves might be the best way of getting the balance right between usability and fraud deterrence and cost, obviously.
I was going to say, I think scale is one little factor in there that's kind of dropped off as well. It's the scale of it. You talk about the volumes that we've got at the moment when we're doing it with a still document image, just a photograph of a document. And I think from our point of view, we don't see any significant drop off or a huge amount of friction switching between a selfie of a person and a video capture of a person. And we can only assume that the same thing would happen when you take it to do a video capture of a document. As Dimi said, I think kind of like the gains of having a video capture, there are some, but they're only going to be a few. If you think about all the security features that Daniela had mentioned, that Michael and I and Dimi have talked about, and the environment that you're going to be capturing that video in of that document, you're still losing out on many of the go-tos for your border guard. You're still having to focus on very similar aspects that we've already mentioned. So I'd say it's another bullet in the gun rather than the silver bullet.
Yeah, I agree here. In addition to biometrics and facial recognition, another question: can face recognition recognize two images of the same person, where one image has a face which is 15, 20 years old, and one face image is of the recent year? Good question.
Yeah.
I'm not the biometric specialist there. I think Dimi has the most the most background on that.
So this depends. Like facial biometrics has features which are called permanent and temporary, and there are some features which are permanent and some features which are temporary. So temporary features would be stuff like facial hair, for example, or the presence or absence. You know, I might shave or lose all of my hair, whatever. So there are these temporary features. And then there are permanent features which have more to do with the bone structure. So, for example, the distance between your zygomatic bones, the distance between the tip of your nose and the bottom of your chin, the distance between the corners of your mouth. Those sets of distances generally stay the same, or the ratios between those distances generally stay the same because the whole face ages at the same time. Generally, so there are techniques and methods with some people are more reliable. Some forms of facial recognition that would work better with across long ages or like long distances of time, and some that work better across short distances of time. But it depends on, like I said, how the training sets have been designed and what the facial recognition models use as a heavy, or like in terms of like what influences the algorithms the most. Is it more that the permanent features have a higher weight, or is it the temporary features that have a higher weighting in the way that the algorithm works? So it depends. Like you'd have to run an independent test, and then you'll see.
Then the last one on biometrics, a quick one. It can be a yes and no answer. Is it normal for financial services to use biometric technologies?
I think it's necessary rather than normal.
Yeah, that's what I would have said as well. Yeah.
I think we're redefining normal as we speak.
Yeah,
not to sidestep the question too much. If you said 5 years ago, then no. But if you said within the last 18 months, say definitely.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And that's always the question. We can authenticate an identity document, but if we don't know who is sitting behind the laptop and who is providing that document, then the check is pretty useless. So it's not the normal, but it's the necessary.
Yeah. I think the key part here is probably, are those, you know, the worry some people have is, are those records kept? And I think if you actually look into it, you'll find almost without exception, those records get deleted after a set period of time. That's part of your kind of conditions on the way in, that you understand that. But it's generally not a large amount of time. There aren't sort of massive vaults with everybody's pictures or videos kept in them. Let's put it that way.
That's true. But we can fill another 2 hours with privacy concerns on storage of
We're
information.
probably not the most qualified people to speak about it.
No,
There are more qualified people. Let's put it that way. Even within our own company, there are some real experts on privacy.
That's true. A couple of minutes left. A couple of questions, Daniela. Yeah, Interpol and Onfido, we cooperate for a long time now, and our cooperation goes way back. What do you think when you look at the cooperation between the private sector and the governmental sector, or private sector and Interpol? How did that evolve over the past years? When you look at it, what's your opinion on that?
Yes, as I have mentioned earlier, in Interpol, we are increasing cooperation with the private sector in all crime areas. So, in particular, to security document examination initiatives, we started to cooperate with private sector back to 2015. So we already maintain good 6 years of partnerships with various private companies. So I don't like to name all companies, all private companies who are really contributing financially, but also with their expertise to our program. But I can say that we have excellent cooperation, and with number of them, we already developed number of e-learning training modules. So all these training modules are available on our platform. But I repeat again, all these modules are for law enforcement use. So this means that we do cooperate with the private sector. We take advantage of their expertise and new trends on security to enhance document security. So all this knowledge and expertise we deliver for first line responders to border control, immigration, but also forensic document examiners, and to help them to check and identify new security features, and also how to spot fraudulent documents. So I can say that in terms of our public-private partnership, and in particular Interpol partnership with the private companies, is going very well. It is increasing, and more we have an interest from private companies to cooperate with us in terms of developing joint initiatives together, not only training courses, but also operations and different workshops, mainly at the border control crossing points. So this is our initiative also with you, possibly for the next year.
Yeah,
Yet to be developed and designed. Yeah.
That's completely true. Yeah, from my own experience as well, working for the government 20 years ago, and now I'm on the other side. You can see it's people understand now why we need to cooperate to fight crime. That's what it is.
I was going to chime in with this if I can, real quick. Onfido is actually part of a lobbying group or a trade body within the UK, and there will eventually be other ones set up in other countries as well. But obviously, this is where we're fundamentally based. So this is the one we've joined up with. We're part of the ADVP, which is the Association of Document Verification Professionals. And this is a group that is regularly in contact with government, trying to help and advise on the initiative of moving into this whole digital online verification, because obviously it's made up of it. There's no kind of competitive interest, as it were. We're all bodied together to represent the industry so that we can give a solid view to government. And you'll find that we are conversing with different law enforcement agencies. So you can't just talk about law enforcement as in one massive entity. There are several different agencies within that, and some of them are more aware of the situation or more open to discussion at this point. Others are still maybe a little bit reticent, but generally the vibe has improved quite a lot, certainly since the pandemic. People are definitely waking up to the situation.
Thanks, Simon. We still have some questions left, but time is up. If your question is not answered and you really would like an answer from one of us, please leave your details or send a message afterward, and we're more than happy to contact you and to answer all of your questions. Even if after the webinar new questions pop up, I can imagine with all this information, we're more than happy to answer them. Yeah, now we're here at the end. I would like to thank all of you for your participation. It was a very great group of people, a big group of people. I would like to thank Daniela again. I want to thank Interpol, the colleagues of Onfido for organizing this. I hope that during one of our next events, you will be joining us as well. And we always love your input on content as well. So if you have any requests of fraudulent documents, fraud rings, algorithms, name it, please send it to us, and we can run a new webinar on those topics. Thanks again. I hope you will have a good evening or afternoon or morning wherever you are based in the world, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.